So I'd like to crack the door on my personal life a little bit, um, give you a little bit of background on where I'm coming from, because I think it's important as we are talking about this issue of pain and suffering and evil and how we address that as believers. Um, these issues are very personal, and these issues are very personal to me. Uh, the worst day of my life was April 30th, 1995. And that was the day, it was a Sunday morning. But that was the day that my sister, my older sister, is about 3 years older than me. She was driving to church and was driving to church too fast. And on one of the curves leading up to our church, she flipped her car, was thrown from the car, and she died instantly. And that event obviously rocked my world, and continues to be a very painful thing in my life. And in the wake of that tragedy, when tragedies happen to different people, people respond in a host of different ways. For me, that event, that tragedy in my life, really woke me up from my nominal Christianity. I was the typical church kid, kind of going through the motions, just living a very nominal, very, I would say, boring life of faith. And that event really woke me up to the realities of life and death. And it caused me to ask some important questions in my life. Why am I here? What am I doing? What am I investing my life in? Is my faith truly meaningful in my life, or am I just going through the motions? And so that event, that tragedy that happened to me, set a certain chain of events in motion. Fast forward to an event that happened just a year or so ago. I was at Chick-fil-A having lunch with one of my good friends, and his name's Brandon. And Brandon has a daughter with some profound special needs, physical needs that have demanded a lot of time, a lot of resources, and just a lot of anxiety and fear in their family. And Brandon and I were having a conversation. And in the middle of this conversation, Brandon says to me, "Imagine that there's a red button on this table. And if you press this red button, everything with your sister, the tragedy that happened with her, the loss of her in your family, in your life, everything goes away. So you press this red button and it never happens." And he just asked me a question: would you press that button? And, my first response, I've got to admit, was, of course. I mean, what kind of unfeeling monster would I be if I didn't press the button? Are you kidding? To have a chance to see my sister again, to have a chance to talk with her again, and to share life with her again. I mean, you couldn't stop me from pressing that button. But then when I really started to think about it, I started to think about everything that's happened in my life since she has died. I made the decision, at least in large part because of that tragedy, I made the decision to forego a scholarship at another university and instead pursue my education at a Bible college, a decision that was met with a great deal of disapproval among some of my teachers and advisors in high school. But I made the decision that, life is short, and I want to spend my life investing in things that matter for eternity. And so I decided in that moment to tithe my education, to spend at least 1 year of my education studying Scripture, studying theology, studying the things of God. Well, I went to that Bible college and was able to meet some people there, some faculty there that invested in me, that challenged me, that asked me to just take some risks to see what God might have in store for my life. And through their influence and through their guidance, I came to I'll admit, the difficult decision to dedicate my life to vocational ministry. Um, and my first ministry out of college was at a wonderful little country church in Hartsburg, Illinois, where I spent 5 years there, serving and preaching and making some wonderful relationships. Um, After those 5 years, I was called to Ozark Christian College to teach. And I have loved my time teaching at Ozark. I've loved investing in students' lives. I love kind of seeing the light bulb go on for them, and seeing, you know, seeing them discover how God might use them in their lives. I also, while I was at Bible college, I was able to meet my future wife, and we started dating my junior year of college and got married after we both were done with school. Since that time, we've had 3 wonderful kids, um, and and I think about, if I would have pressed that button, if that tragedy would have never happened in my life, I very likely would not have ended up at that Bible college. I very likely would not have ended up pursuing ministry with my life. I very likely would not have ended up serving in that wonderful little church in Hartsburg, Illinois, meeting those wonderful people who have blessed my life. I probably would not have met my wife or had my kids. So if I press that button, all that goes away. But more than that, because of the tragedy that happened with my sister, my parents made a difficult decision several years later to leave Indiana, where we grew up, and to take a ministry in Southwest Missouri. They also adopted a beautiful little girl from the Philippines, my sister Norlita. And it's because of them moving to Joplin, and also because of them adopting my little sister, that I came back home as much as I possibly could to visit them in Southwest Missouri, and got to know the people at Ozark Christian College. And I think to myself, if I pressed that button, then I probably wouldn't have my sister Norlita in my life. I probably would not be a professor at Ozark Christian College and get to enjoy the benefits of this wonderful ministry among college students. And you start to realize in that moment, I don't know the definition of what is truly good nearly as confidently as I think I do. When things happen to us in our lives, our immediate response, when tragedy happens, I should say, our immediate response is, well, this is bad. This is wrong. This is evil. I'm suffering. And certainly all those statements are true. We are suffering. It is evil. It is bad. Losing my sister was the worst thing that ever happened to me. It still is painful to me. But now that I'm removed by it by almost 20 years, I can reflect on how that's been used for certain goods in my life, how God has redeemed that event and brought about change in my life as a result of it. So my immediate judgment of that tragedy can't be the final judgment of that tragedy. And this is exactly the point when it comes to pain and suffering. A lot of times we make an immediate judgment. We say, this is wrong, this is bad, this is evil. And we assume a God's eye perspective on the evil things that happen. We assume that we know, just like God knows, what the ultimate end or what the ultimate result of this is going to be, but we don't. We don't. And this is the point that we're making this week when we talk about various theodicies. What we often fail to recognize is the changes that these tragedies introduce into our lives. Changes that do ultimately work for our good. Now that doesn't do away with the problem. It doesn't alleviate the pain and the suffering that we feel in that moment, and that we continue to residually feel through the years. So it doesn't just turn a blind eye to pain and suffering, but it does perhaps make it more meaningful as we think about how these moments of pain and suffering may be redeemed by God to His purposes.